All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Coffee with the Freight Coach. My name is Chris Jolly. I am your host, and I am the Freight Coach. Before we jump into the episode, as always, thank you guys so much for coming out and listening to this podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single episode that I do. And I say that because I only speak to transportation professionals on this show, as well as my weekday live show, because I want to put the right information out there from the people who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. It's one of the many, many reasons why I proudly fly that American flag behind me every single day. A, we're the greatest nation on earth, but B, I'm living my American dream, and I want to help each and every one of you live yours as well. I do have one small favor to ask. If and when you get value, because I know you're going to get value, but if you do, and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. Share it out there to your network. This is how we are the top-ranked podcast in the industry, is because of each and every one of you. And most importantly, this is how we reach and help more people, is because if you see value, your network's going to see value as well. All right, I got a very special guest for you guys here today. I love talking about procurement. I love talking about how are we vetting carriers, because I am all about reutilizing the same drivers time and time again, identifying which ones work for your customers' freight, so you don't have to deal with a lot of the garbage that's out there. Now, does that eliminate it entirely? No, it doesn't, but there are things that you can do behind the scenes to ensure that you're putting the right carrier on the right loads. So with that being said, I have my man Mark Funk here. He is the Director of Carrier Procurement over at SPI Logistics. Mark, thank you for joining me again.
Hey, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me on the show today, man. Looking forward to it.
I know it's odd this time. Last time it was in person when we were out in Orlando at the TIA, but we're going to get together again here in April when you are in Phoenix, and then we're going to go smash some barbecue. We're going to get some really good quality barbecue.
I'm looking forward to that, man. Absolutely.
Oh, man. So, dude, what brought you into trucking? Like, how did you get your start into the transportation industry?
I don't think anybody wakes up and says, "Hey, I wanted to be in transportation," right? It just kind of loops you in, and the short answer to that story is just doing the stuff that nobody else wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right. I got my start. I was working at a company where we were importing freight from overseas, and that we noticed that we had some issues. And they said, "Hey, Mark, can you get in and help us get this container moved?" I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and here I am, 25 years later, working at SPI. My career, I was working at Sara Lee for several years in their U.S. Foods division. Worked at Total Quality Logistics there for 10 years, director of carrier operations at that company. And then I went to R&L, and now here I am at SPI.
I think you're right, because I come from a trucking family, right? So it's one of those situations, like not everybody grows up like that, but I mean, it is one of those things where there's two types of people. I'm in the industry because my entire family has worked in this industry, or I pretty much lost a bet and found out, and here I am 15 years later, and I can't leave. But this industry is, from my perspective, man, I think that this is one of them. Like, I don't want to ever call anything recession proof, but like, this industry is always going to be around. And because if it's not, we have a lot bigger problems going on, and I don't think anyone's going to be really concerned about that at that point. But there's a lot of stuff in the news, and because I think that fraud and double brokering, I mean, I want to be like, it's been around ever since I've been in this industry, right?
Yeah,
Ever since.
it is.
It's not a new problem, but there are new ways of kind of going out and looking at how are you working with the carriers that you're going to work with. And, the good and the bad is there's a lot of companies out there that offer stuff for you to utilize. The bad is how do you actually work with this information, though? Because I've seen some carriers that have popped up on specific platforms that have a really bad rating, but they're the best carriers I've ever worked with. They literally do everything right. Photos, tracking, driver answers, everything you need. So it's like, how do you use your experience? Because this is something that I don't really see a lot of content out there on, Mark, is how do you use your experience to use the best judgment? Because data is subjective. Data can be wrong, but what do you trust in those moments, though?
Well, okay. So, Chris, you said a lot there, right?
Yeah.
I think the first thing is you want to always trust your gut. Yeah, no data, nothing like that can actually replace how you feel and how it is talking to the carrier. Until you're in the seat and you got the carrier on the phone, you don't know. But now what you can do, especially with today, is some of the data. You can look at these points and you say, all right, what can I do to put these points together to give me the most probability that this carrier is going to perform the way I want them to perform, right? So there's several platforms out in the industry. I don't want to give too much of a shout out to people, but you've got Truckers Tools, you got Carrier Sure, you got CargoNet, you got all these other places out there. And so what we're doing here at SPI, I'll focus on that a little bit. We're taking a look at all of these different tech platforms, and what we're doing is we're putting together for lack of better words, an instantaneous search model where our agents will be able to type in an identifier for that carrier, right? So whether it's their MC number, their DOT, whatever it is, and then that will kick off a process. That process will go out. It'll go through a series of decision points and come back, and it's going to make something so simple for the agent that it takes that hesitation of should I load this carrier or not off the plate. It's going to tell you, hey, this is a good carrier. You should expect a good performance out of this carrier, or hey, there are so many different data signals out in the ecosphere. Probably not a good idea. Or you know what? Hey, this carrier, you may be able to use them, but there's some other things that we want to look at more deeply, like a deep dive type situation. But I think it's key to know where the data is coming from, all those data signals, and then putting those in front of the agent or the broker who's going to be tendering that load. I mean, again, there's some old school things that need to happen if you're going to tender a load to a carrier. You can't, to your point, you can't just purely trust the data. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do. Take a lot of the noise out, refine the data signals, and make it as easy as possible for that agent or that broker to make a decision whether they're going to use the carrier or not.
I look at a lot of it like this, Mark, because obviously I still, I broker freight. I do this every single day. I talk to carriers every single day. Throughout my career, I have identified there are some very key characteristics on where like you said, trust your gut, on what my gut is going to go with, right? Because I have found that for the most part, a lot of the scams that go out there, they're targeting individuals who don't know or seemingly are put off by what they're trying to do, right? So it's like, and when I say that is you're very vague in how you're selling the load. You're like, you can tell that you don't care about your job. You can tell that the freight doesn't matter to you. You're more trying to strong arm people and being like, take it or leave it style mentalities. And because I've found this, every single load that we book, we have in-depth conversations with the carriers, right? Like we're out there, we are pressing them to get information because at the end of the day, most of the scammers all say an iteration of the exact same thing. And I'm not concerned about the price as much as I am about booking the right carrier on the load. And, I've dealt with this before, right? Because they're always like, hypothetical example, the load pays $2,000. They're going to be like, oh man, send it to me for 1,800. But like they're just little things like that. Or, they also don't know information. Oh, I have like 7 trucks in the area, or I'm going to have this happen or that happen. And I'm like, no, it's pretty simple. Give me all 7 truck and trailer numbers, drivers' names, and driver cell phone numbers, and then let me know which one you're going to use if that's the case. And 99% of them are just going to hang up the phone on you, right? And I think that's always going to be the biggest fraud detector out there, Mark, is if they're rushing you off the phone. That is the biggest fraud detector out there, because the real carriers who have real businesses and run specific freight, who have dedicated customers that they need to reposition their capacity into, they're vetting you too to make sure, like, is this load an actual shipment, or are you just the prototypical broker who just kind of like sprays and prays and throws stuff up there? Those are the carriers that you really want to work with.
Oh yeah, no doubt, exactly right. So kind of bringing it back a little bit when we're talking about double brokering and that stuff, how it's always been around. Back in 2008, 2009, we saw a sizable rise in the number of scams and stuff, but they were more related to the ComCheck scams and things like that. But what's happening now in the industry, Chris? You look at it like this: we got 2 types of theft, right? So you have straight theft and you got strategic theft, right? Straight theft, pretty clear and simple. You got a truck, it's in a lot somewhere, somebody breaks the seal, they open up and they steal a couple TVs or whatever it is, and they go somewhere. What's happening now, what the rise is this strategic theft. And this strategic theft is set out with the main focus of being deceptive, right? To your point, right? They don't know all of these details. And you've got a lot of these I'm going to say advanced theft rings
Yeah.
will go out and they'll buy blocks of MCs, and what they'll do is they'll burn through an MC and they'll go to another and they'll go to another. And there are some things that a an agent or a broker can do to make sure that they're going to limit their chances of having a double brokered load, right? Some of the things that you had talked about, you want to be very careful about a low rate. To your point, if it should pay 2,000 and somebody, I'll take it for 1,800. Okay, that should raise a red flag, right? If you call it's a small carrier, maybe they got 1 or 2 power units and it sounds like it's a call center, that doesn't sound good,
Correct.
right? If the carrier is 100% agreeable to everything, right? They don't worry about if it's first come, first serve, if the appointment time, they don't, oh, I'll take it, I'll take it, I'll take it. That's a concern.
Yeah.
Another thing that's if they're talking about quick pay right away, hey, what's your quick pay options? Can I get a contract fuel advance on it? If they're asking that right away, I mean, that doesn't mean that they're not a good carrier, or they're maybe having cash flow options or problems, things like that. But it's another thing that raises your antenna. If the contact information doesn't match. I mean, how many times have we been on the phone with a carrier and we're looking at it and maybe it's at ABC carrier and they say, oh, hey, listen, I'm on the road, I'm not in the office. Can you send it to my Gmail account?
Yeah.
Right away. Red flag. Okay.
Right.
We've got an issue here. Or here's another thing too I've seen happen where the driver information changes at the last minute.
Yeah.
I was going to send in John. Oh, by the way, it's not John and it's not this phone number. It's going to be somebody totally different. You got to ask those questions, but getting them on the phone, talking to them, to your point, you can't get past that. That is key.
No, it really is, right? And I just think that they're always looking for that because the identity of a carrier, and I want to talk about you said it's strategic theft was the term that you used they do buy blocks of MCs and everything, and then they just kind of run through
That's
them,
one
right?
of them. That's one of them. I mean, another thing too. I mean, just to kind of go down that tangent a little bit too. Another big strategic theft is what they're doing is they're taking this freight, they're double brokering it to a real carrier,
Yeah.
right? That's the victim. We'll call them a victim carrier.
Sure.
That victim carrier takes it to a warehouse where a ring has rented some space or whatever.
Yeah.
They'll bring it in, and it may come in as a TV. They'll store it in that warehouse. They'll change it and put it as electronics on a new BOL, send it to another carrier. And what they're doing is they're washing it through the supply chain network, right? So then it goes somewhere else. At the end of the chain, it comes out as FAK.
Yeah.
It's hard to find it. It gets sold and it gets put back in there. But that's another thing of strategic theft. So the thing is with strategic theft, the intent is set out to deceive the broker or the shipper.
Because I've seen it happen, and I want to be blunt. Never post the commodity. If you're going to post a load, never post the commodity, because that is what a lot of them are looking for on load boards, right? They are looking for what this is, and then again, when you're calling in and they're, and it's tough because about the commodity aspect of things, right? Because there are drivers out there who, for religious beliefs, won't haul alcohol, certain meats, stuff like that. If they and if they're really pressing on the commodity, right? Like if you're like, oh, it's household goods. Well, what kind of household goods? That would be a red flag to me too, right? Because there's stuff out there, and especially if you're working with some of your customers who have, you got to think, is this a high street value item, right? Like, is it an easy liftable item where they could take the trailer, dump it, and be gone, and it's quick, right? Because they know, because like I've dealt with this in my career. I had a customer that bottled water loads. There was an organized crime ring that hit it in Florida. And, again, we found the trailers in the Everglades essentially a couple of weeks later. But,
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where it's like, okay, now we got to look at the commodity as it's not if it's a low value, because like the bottled water was only like $20,000 a load, right? Like it's low value, but it's quick. They can lift it quick on the streets. They can get rid of it quick on the streets. And those are other things to keep in mind as you're going out there. And here's another thing too, when we're out there and getting carrier secured on loads, and if it's a weekend load, again, details are everything. If it's an extended transit, where are you storing the load at? I need the address. Is there security? I truly feel like, Mark, the best deterrent out there is going to be questions, and press them, because it's really going to turn off a lot of those individuals because they're looking for that quick buck.
Well, they are. They are. And you were talking about water. So the number one item for theft is food and anything edible, because the evidence is gone, right?
Yeah.
Once they steal it, it's gone. And we've seen a dramatic, we as in the industry have seen a dramatic rise in thefts related to those types of situations, because it's just gone. Right. And there's other things that you can do as you're talking to the carrier and you're trying to find out what's going on. If something, I guess really what it comes down to, if the deal seems too good to be true, it probably isn't a good deal.
Yeah.
Right. And you look at it, and there's different tricks you can do with a carrier on the phone. And you were talking about a little bit earlier on the podcast, but another one too is you can say, okay, hey, what's your MC, and what's the corporate, where are you working at? What's your corporate address? They tell you, and then you say, hey, well, what's the weather like there? As they tell you, you're just having general conversation. You're looking at the weather and you're saying, they tell you, oh, it's sunny and 70. Well, you look at it and it's rainy and clouds. Okay, so I know that's trivial, but that's another way you can look at it. There's other things you can do too. I've seen it where people have said, hey, I'll give the driver a code, just a random 4-digit code, and I need that driver to put that code on the door of his truck with the MC number and take a picture and send it to me.
Yeah.
Right. You got to be careful, because there's some AI things out there where, believe it or not, Chris, AI, you can go to some of these AI programs and say, show me a person standing in front of a truck holding this code, and it's there and it does it. So you got to be careful. AI has some of the limitations that it can't get people's hands and fingers right. But still, I mean, the chances that you're going to come across those are slim to none. So those are some different things that you can do and what's out there.
I think a lot of this is what I personally love about the investment in fraud identity and everything else out there is I truly feel like it's a really good selling point out there in the market, right? Because as somebody who is out there cold calling and prospecting and doing site visits and building a book of business and everything like that, I haven't had any direct shippers be like, hey, what are you doing for this? But it brings a level of confidence where I can talk to them about our risk mitigation processes and what we do, how we vet our providers who we work with. And it's not just, we don't just set up anybody, right? Like, we have a stringent multi-step process that we follow. Anybody who's onboarded with us has to pass a multi-tier security verification thing as it goes, right? And that, to me, because again, at the end of the day, customers they just they want to make sure that their freight's taken care of and that it's going to be transported as safe as possible, right? Like, yeah, things happen, but to me, it's bringing that sense of ease out there into the market, because I don't know about you, Mark, and this is literally just my opinion. So few people actually care, right? Like, if you're going out there and you're selling, like, so few people everybody just goes through the motions, right? But when you can strategically sell to your customers, and this is what I love the most about having my agency through SPI. SPI heavily invests in our capabilities as an agent to get out there and not only protect our customers' freight, but protect us in a sense as well, and protect the organization. And I personally love it. I truly think it brings a sense of ease as we're going out there and trying to navigate through a difficult freight market. Because, like, reality is every freight market's difficult, right? Remove these last couple of years from it. That's not reality. What people experienced in 2023, that is a real freight market. You have to bring something to the table outside of, hey, I can save you some money and we got trucks in your area.
Yeah. I mean, the approach, the successful approach, would, instead of being, hey, I'm going to be your freight broker or your freight agent, I'm going to be your supply chain consultant. And let me bring you up to speed on some of the things that are happening in the industry. And Chris, I want to talk a little bit about the shippers, right? So the shippers, they have some skin in this game as well, right? Because it's not their core competency. They brought in a freight broker or an agent to help them move this product. But you know what? How many times does an actual agent reach out to their shipper and say, hey, can you just make sure that that truck that's coming in has got this MC number on the door? Right. I mean, I've seen situations, I've heard situations when I go to some of these conferences and stuff, where I'll be talking to some of my counterparts, and they'll be telling me stories, and the shipper has no documentation of who showed up to pick up the freight, right? And no cameras, nothing recorded. They didn't check the MC number, and that could really help out a lot, So part of that, though, is on the agent or the broker talking to that shipper, saying, okay, well, hey, listen, there's this big fraud, scam, theft is happening in the industry. Let me bring you up to speed on what we're doing. Here's some things that you can do to help protect yourself as well.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point, I think a lot of them just go through the motions and they don't do that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Mark. I think that, again, like I've had this conversation with numerous shippers. They're like, we are not transportation experts, right? Like we're a manufacturer. Like our
Yep.
job is not, that's why we work with you. And I just think that so many people overlook that as a value proposition. And it's like research these things, right? Like, and this is why it's like for me, as I'm building up my book of business and everything and doing like I've always been about the niche, but I continue to stay in that niche for a reason, right? Because I feel like everybody has the same issues inside of specific niches, and I want to sell on that, but I also want to be able to deliver the same results, the same executions tactics towards every person that I work with. And it comes with having this behind the scenes where I know for a fact the people that we're sending in are legit, right? Because I've been, like, again, I've been in this industry for a very long time. I've had to make that phone call to a shipper to be like, hey, can you make sure this trucking company has shown up and everything else? But I've also had it happen where we've pulled carriers off loads, right? Where we,
Oh,
we
yeah.
we found something out or something was happening, and I reach out to the shipper and say, hey, if this trucking company, this truck trailer driver shows up, do not load them. I'm not like, I will let you know the carrier that I'm sending in on this load. It brings a sense of relief to the customers in my personal experience because they know you are actively protecting their freight.
Well, sure, sure. And it goes deeper than just that transaction, right? Because you're not looking at it just from a transaction business. You're saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Shipper, I want to be here for you in the long term. So I want to educate you. I want to protect you. I want to make sure that you know I have your back in this. So you're helping them through the way, and you've probably had conversations with them ahead of time, saying, hey, here's what's going on in the industry. Here's what's happening. Here's what we're doing. And you're helping them through this difficult time because that's what it comes down to. You're being a supply chain consultant to them. You're not just being a broker.
Yeah. And I think that so many people kind of take that approach, right? Where they're going through the motion. And I think like that's one thing that I want people to really start looking at because, that's probably one of the most questions that I get, Mark, all the time is how do I find customers? How do I build a book of business? How do I do this job? I'm not getting the training that, I should. And it always boils down to me, like it's the fundamentals of this industry. And I truly feel that is going to make a massive comeback is the blocking and tackling of this industry. The core fundamentals are going to be what customers look for moving forward. I think that, yes, technology is a massive value add. It really is, but you can't sell to a shipper now, hey, look at my tech stack. I think that's beaten and gone. It's got to be,
Well, look at Convoy, right? Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to need people who are like, hey, listen, I've been doing this job. And I'm not saying you need 15 years or 10 years experience in the industry, but they're going to look for people who are like, if you're moving food, they are going to look for people who are selling on the core competencies of transporting that product, not generalized statements, not smoke and mirrors. Hey, look over here to try and mask our operational inefficiencies. And that to me is what is always going to be the greatest separator that's out there. Fortunately, when you're an agent with SPI, you can do that and you have a top tier tech stack to go along with it. So you can free up your time to develop more business, right? Like that's where I think technology needs to focus the most on is internal internal efficiencies, right? How do I maximize my efforts as a business owner, as a sales rep? I want to make as much money as humanly possible, right? How do I do
Oh,
that?
yeah.
I can't be bogged down doing menial tasks. I can't be bogged down in any other area outside of me increasing my sales outreach every single day, whatever that number is, 75 emails, 75 cold calls, whatever that number looks like. That's where your main focus needs to be. And then, like, again, I just got notification as we're on the call right now that one of my drivers just got loaded, right? It's just stuff like that. And that's where my focus needs to be is it's like, hey, my stuff, my operations team, they're running behind the scenes. I can just focus on doing what I do best, and that's developing businesses and that's getting it out there. And that's the security that comes along with being inside of SPI.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's just not talked about a lot out there is because I don't think a lot of people have what we have. I truly don't.
Oh, you know what, Chris, I would agree with you. A lot of them don't. And you know, something you had touched on early on in this podcast was using repeat carriers, right? Because if you're using that repeat carrier, they're familiar with our company, they're familiar with you, they're familiar with your customer, right? But having that tech stack for the carriers, right? So, you know, carriers inside the SPI network, we can, even though we're an agent-based network, we can say, okay, hey, here's all the loads within our network. Here's where we can get you reloaded. Here's we can let you know when there are certain lanes available that match where they want to run, right? And match the requirements. And you take it all the way down to a carrier score. You know, we can look at it, we can score the carriers, and we can bring this together and we can say, okay, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Carrier, this is going to be the best outcome or best possibility of success for you. So, you know, we're matching not just the agents with carriers, but carriers with agents.
Yeah.
There's a lot that SPI brings, and it's something that I think it's a competitive advantage for us. I really do.
I think it's a major competitive advantage that I don't think enough people really utilize in when they're out there trying to develop business, right? Because it's like, from my perspective, if you're going out there, like a lot of the technology that we get to utilize day to day, if you were out there on your own as a pure brokerage on your own, it's expensive, right? And that's the thing, and that's the one thing that nobody ever really talks about because in the brokerage space is if you're going to compete out there, because it's like me and my agent in my agency alone, I have everything that any of the top 10 brokers in North America have from a technology perspective. I have
Sure do.
everything.
Yep.
I have the exact same thing. I have access to all of that. I have access to all the carrier data that I need. I have access to literally whatever I need to succeed. And there are a lot of people that don't look at it from that perspective because it's expensive to run a business. All right. Like this is coming from somebody who's founded a couple of them. It's very expensive to run a business, and especially to compete in the market that we're in right now, because you do need to be able to leverage all of this, right? You need to leverage your tech, but you also need to leverage the fact that you have financial stability right now, because that's another big thing that is, I think, unfortunately going to continue to be on the horizon out there is lack of funds. And that is going to rear its ugly head out here. And what do you do, right? Like, what do you do if you're in a position where, I mean, we've seen this, right? With some of these large companies closing down, they're going to get their money from somewhere, right? And I think that it's the financial health that kind of comes along with it. And that backing is crucial right now because we're able to, it's from the risk, right? Like, well, let's just call it what it is. From the risk standpoint alone, I don't have to worry about if my carriers are going to get paid, right? I don't
That's
have to
correct.
worry
Yep.
about balancing my receivables and my payables to ensure that my carriers get paid in a timely manner. If my receivables get extended out for my customers, I know my carriers are getting paid. That keeps our credibility out there in the market. That's one of the I think, like in any freight market, but especially right now, Mark, I think that's the greatest selling pitch to anybody, especially from a capacity standpoint. Hey, listen, we got the capital. We're good. We have everything that you need to get in there. And our credit score backs it up too, on top of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. When you look at all these news articles that are coming out with all these different freight brokerages that are going out of business and things like that, some of the big warning signs that these carriers have said it was their payables or
Yeah.
their receivables that started aging because these brokerages weren't paying them. They
Yeah.
didn't have the ability to pay them. And you know, at SBI we're very solvent. We have great credit score. We take care of our agents. We take care of our carriers. You know, it's key. It's fundamental in this business. Carriers work hard. They deserve to be paid for what the work that they do, and they need to be paid on time. And we offer that. We ensure that. Actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a relief to the carrier community out there because I mean, I talk to a lot of drivers all the time, right? And a lot of them, even for my podcasts and stuff like that. And they're because you brought it up earlier about the carrier who actually hauls the load. They're the real victims in this
Yeah,
situation. And that is, I would say, the biggest overlook of the entire fraud conversation that's out there. What about those carriers
yeah,
who actually haul the freight that aren't getting paid? They're like essentially they get no, like all the double brokers who are literally going to continue to do this no matter what. They're going to batch buy MCs. They're going to continue to do that, but they're putting all these people out of business, right? Nobody is out there protecting them. And that's one thing that I like is like some of those identifiers, because I tell carriers all the time, vet your brokers, right?
Oh, yes.
Vet
Yep.
the brokers that you are working with. And that, again, it's just like if you have a question about an SPI rep, call SPI corporate, verify all of that stuff. The back office team is like they answer 24/7, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
and that's where it's like that's how you really stand out. Is it's like you can tell, that put that information out there at scale. Hey, give us a call direct. Call me direct if you need to. You can, like, if any of my friends who are carriers who are listening to this show have any questions about SPI and the freight that they're like, call me, email me, DM me. I will make sure that everything is legit on that side. And I think because we go above and beyond to ensure that obviously the agents are taken care of, but the carriers who are hauling our freight, they're taken care of as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, absolutely they are. And, we have a pretty stringent vetting process. We really do, Chris. So, when we turn a carrier down who may want to be part of our network, there's a lot of thought that's put into that. And it's not just because we say, okay, well, hey, this carrier, we want to protect our agency. We want to protect those other victim carriers out there, right? Because here's the deal: if we let a bad actor into our network and something happens down the way, it affects everybody in the industry. Sure, we get it up front, as far as being effective, but it affects the victim carriers as well. And when I go to some of these conferences or when I talk to certain carriers, and they're telling me some of the horror stories where they've got a load from another broker and it's been triple brokered and they don't know how they're going to get paid. And they call me and they say, hey, how do I work this? What do I do? And it have nothing to do with SPI on that load, but I'll spend that time to work with them. Okay, here's what you got to do. Here's how you should do this process. Right? Simply because I know they're out there, they're working, they're busting their ass, they're trying to get shit done. And then you've got these bad actors who are stealing money from them. And it's not right.
No, it's really not, man. And it's one of those things that, again, we got to get ahead of a lot of it's like, where are things going, right? Where are things going to trend to continue to protect the freight that's out there, right? Because it's alarming how much I think it was, I forget how much, $800 million in freight got stolen or something like that.
Well, see, that's only the reporting. I think you're
Yeah.
quoting CargoNet, I think is where you're getting that
Okay.
from.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: the majority, believe it or not, the majority of cargo theft, it's not reported.
Yeah.
It's not reported, right? If there's a situation and let's say $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 of product is stolen, and I'm talking straight theft in this situation, right? Well, deductibles can be higher than that.
Yeah.
So carriers will just pay. I don't know about you, Chris, but I can't afford just to write a check for $10,000. How do you think these victim carriers are going to do it?
Dude,
Right?
that's the thing, man, and that's another thing to take into consideration. I'm glad you brought that up. Um, that is all the more reason to go out there and vet the providers that you're working with, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, do you have your deductible covered in the event that something happens, right? And I would argue that the majority of people out there don't, right? And for me, it's just so much more than what is really advertised, and I think that there's got to be more solutions talked about at scale, right? And it's more tactics about what people can do, because these guys aren't smart, right? Like they're smart, like the thieves, they're smart, but they're not at the same time. All right. Because they've been doing the same shit for years, Mark. It's just they keep doing it because nobody's really doing anything about it.
Chris, so you're going to go back to the FMCSA here, right? And you're going to get me started on that. And I could take hours talking about some of the opportunities that we're having with the FMCSA, we as in the industry, right? But I mean, when you've got 700 plus carriers all registered out of the same address in Wyoming, that should be a red flag to the FMCSA,
Straight up, it is. It is.
right?
Here's my honest thing, and this is Chris Jolly's opinion only, because I've done all the research about all of this stuff. The only reason the FMCSA, from my standpoint, is not doing anything about it, why would they cut off their revenue? Because
No,
why would they do anything about it if it's, again, we're talking, you said 700 MCs at, we'll just, for easy math, $300 a pop. That's $200,000 in revenue right there for them just to do that. They're not incentivized to change because that's a large chunk of their money, right? So like that's my honest opinion on why it doesn't stop, because they're making money off of it.
Yeah, Chris, I can't really comment to how or why they may be doing it, but I can tell you that there are some things that seem that things that could be implemented that could significantly help the industry as a whole, and it's not happening and it's not getting done.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Mark. I truly think that there are some, because again, you've been in this industry a long time. I've been in this industry a long time. We're kind of like repeating a lot of this stuff, right? There's a lot of talk about what is wrong, but there's very little action, it seems like, to kind of fix a lot of those core issues. Not from everybody, but I think, like, again, there's a lot of situations that I've experienced in my career that keep popping up, and I tend to wonder, well, why? Why does this keep happening? Why isn't there any legislation done to change any of this stuff? But it's going to be interesting to see, man. I think that we're on the right path as an industry, though, because I think that there's enough meddling on Capitol Hill, we'll call it, on where fraud is and where it's trending. And I think that, it will reach a point at some time where there will be something done at scale to put an end to this.
Yeah, well, right now we are experiencing the most that we've ever experienced in the industry, and I think that makes it it's very prevalent, right? So everybody's talking about, we're talking about it. You'll see other podcasts talking about it, things like that. There's always articles, conferences happening. So yeah, those dialogues are happening, and they need to happen more. But until then, it's educating the carriers so they don't become victim carriers, right? It's educating the shippers on their part and how they can help out. It's making sure that the agents are able to have the tools and the knowledge to make sure that they can vet some of the stuff before it gets into the
Yeah.
supply chain. So we're handling it from one end, but to your point, there needs to be some type of oversight from a government level.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out over the next couple of years. And especially if, the market doesn't recover at the pace that I think some are kind of hoping for, right? Like I truly feel like the market, outside of a major geopolitical event that rocks the world, I think it's going to be a slow and steady rise. I truly do. I don't think it's going to be anything cataclysmic. I think it's going to be a slow and steady rise. And I think that what people are going to start to experience now is what a real freight market actually is, because that's what 2023 was. And I truly feel like it's going to be back to the basics on how things were for the first, 10 years in my career, because a lot of what people were experiencing out there is an anomaly. It'll never come back.
No,
or at least I
no.
hope it doesn't come back, because that means that we're in a pretty bad spot in some areas. But like where we're at right now, again, I truly feel like you got to pair up with, whether you're a carrier or a broker or an agent, you got to pair up with the right companies who are setting you up for success, because it's not just about, it is about how much margin or what you can make on a load. Yes. But what does the infrastructure look like? How are you protecting it? Because there's some cases that are out there that are getting some pretty big headlines from a broker liability perspective and everything else. You're going to get drug into that stuff. And if you don't have the capital to fight it, you're done. Right. And then
Yeah.
can't say, I didn't think about that as a business. Right. And that's what I like. And another thing that I'm really, really attracted to about SPI is you guys are constantly on top of where things are to protect our businesses, right? Because that's really what it boils down to. You're protecting our business. You're setting us up for success in the long run.
Well, yeah, you've got to. And to your point, there are a lot of different court cases that are happening right now, and you've got courts offering different opinions on different things as when it comes to broker liability,
Yep, the
right?
Seventh and Ninth Circuit.
7th, the 9th, and the 11th, right? And you've got these things going on, and there was just something released just recently. I might have been today actually on Freight Waves, where they were talking about some of the stuff and how the Supreme Court has decided that they're not going to get involved in this.
Yeah, I broke
Right?
that article down on my live show today, and it was one was with they refused to hear global trans. I think
Yes.
with Global Trans, and then they refused to hear the one with C.H. Robinson, but it was opposite rulings, similar situation, opposite rulings. And it's crazy to think though, because it's like I told people and I warned people today, Mark, I'm like, listen, as a broker, I'm like, this doesn't mean you're in the clear on anything. If you are
No.
associated with any of these shipments, just like a theft one, and this is why you need to take fraud and all this stuff very seriously, you will get drug into this. Like, you are not immune from this to happen because in one case, the F4A says that brokers weren't a part of it. You will get drug into this, even into the litigation process, because like when it gets to the Seventh Circuit or the Ninth Circuit of the Court of Appeals, that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars of lawyer fees to get to that point. So if you can't fight that in the lower circuits, you're toast.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Right. And here it comes all the way back to picking up the phone and having a conversation with, if I'm a shipper, picking up that phone and having a conversation with my freight agent or my brokerage and saying, okay, what should I be asking? What don't I know? And you know what? If it comes down to it, and Chris, you know this, SPI will send a team with an agent to a customer to have those conversations,
Yep.
right? To help them, because in the end, if we're helping that shipper, it's helping the industry and it's helping everybody.
Amen to that, Mark. Mark, I appreciate your time, man. How does anybody reach out to you? Whether if it's a carrier who's like, hey, I need help on, identifying if this
Absolutely.
broker's real, or a broker, or anybody who just wants to get out and talk to you, man, how do they reach out?
Well, they can obviously contact SPI at our main number, but they can also send me an email directly, right? It's mfunk at SPI3PL. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. All my information's out there. It's public. Send me an email, call me. As long as I'm not in the middle of a meeting doing a podcast or something, I'm going to answer the call, and I'm going to help you the best I can, because listen, we're in this together. We really are.
I appreciate it, man. And as always, you guys can get a hold of me. I'll put you guys in contact with anybody over at SPI, Mark, whoever you guys need. And if you guys made it this far in the episode, which I'm sure you did, because there's a ton of value in this, and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. Share it out through your network. This is how we help more people, is because of each and every one of you. And the fact that if you see value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.